And we're back. Welcome back to the breakdown of the simulation work for the Cerebus bursting through the hedges scene. This is part 2, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how the vines were done in this scene. So I've opened up the final completed scene here with everything all cached out. So the particles you see in the first video have been cached out, and then each instance has been turned into a live geometry using a script that I found on Creative Crash. Basically it takes each particle instance and bakes it down, including the animation as well. So really useful script, highly recommended. So as you can see, I'm just scrubbing through. Right, each particle has keyframes. It's really useful as the final touch to the scene. Can help with rendering issues and gives good performance as well. It's pretty cool. We can scrub back and forth. So that's the leaves cached out. So let's start off actually with, let me explain how the vines were simulated. So that's the actual geometry that was simulated. You can see it's not too high poly, it's very basic. You don't want to make the mesh too dense, otherwise it's going to take forever to simulate. And I'll show you the settings I use for the vines. So after the vines were simulated and cached out, I added particle instances to each vine. I'm not sure if it's... yeah, okay. So as you can see, if we zoom right in, each mesh of the vine has particles emitting from it, and these particles then give birth to the leaves as instances. And the particles are dynamically constrained to the vines. So as the vines move, you can see the particles stay attached. If I can select the damn particles. Here we go. No, wrong one. Okay. Not sure if you can see this properly. But if we scrub through, you can see each particle sticks to the exact same position of the vine. And once we replace the particles with the instances of the leaves and also secondary vines, yeah, it looks quite nice. So if I kill the instancer, so you can see these are the instanced objects that are sticking onto the vines. I'll just switch them off. There we go. That's better. So you can see this is the base simulation of the base M-cloth simulation of the vines. Just by itself, really nothing special. But once we add the additional geometry onto it, yeah, makes it look a lot more complicated than it really is. So let's have a quick look at the instance objects. So along with this very simple secondary vine and leaves, they are also just individual leaves using the same technique as before. Basically, I've just included an additional one in the instance. So I've only got 3 different objects in here, 2 leaves and this one here, curly vine with leaves. Okay, so let's switch to another scene. I think, sorry about that, I just had to make sure that I was showing you guys the right scene, because the one I had before was incorrect. Okay, this one looks better. I don't think I've cached the simulation on this one, so yeah, I haven't. So things might run a little bit slow. Okay, so going back to the vines, created 2 vines just using very simple geometry. It's actually a cylinder, very low res, and the vines kind of snap as Cerebus runs through. So I've created 2, and the breaking point is in the middle here. Now you can use tearable surface in Mmesh, but I just found, just having 2 geometry and then connecting them with a constraint works quite well. And I did try tearable surface, and yeah, it was terrible. Oh, zing. So each one of these has a end dynamics, Mmesh, create end cloth. I'll put cloth on it, and Cerebus himself I've set as a passive collider. So as he's running through, he collides with the end cloth, and then he snaps it, right? So you can see that the end cloth doesn't snap straight away, and that's because, see, it's still, the two cloth are still being held together by a transform constraint, which is this one. A dynamic constraint. You can make those I use the component to component and constraint. So select these 2 and component to component, and what it does is it basically sets a constraint in the middle here, and you can either keyframe or dynamically set the breaking point of this constraint. So in my settings for this one, using rubber band, and yeah, as with all simulations, lots of tweaking, lots of testing, and that's why you don't want to start off with a super high mesh, geometry mesh. Otherwise it's gonna take you forever to just test the simulations. So start off low. If you need to up-res it later, you can. The strength, glue strength. So if I set this to 1, that will mean the breaking point will be harder to break, basically, and we might see some crazy things going on here. so it basically never breaks because the glue strength is set to 1. But the M mesh is stretching, right? Because in your M mesh settings, in your dynamic properties of the end cloth, you've got your, your stretch resistance, compression resistance, blah blah blah. Lots of documentation, tutorials on this. So getting the setting just right is the tricky part. Having them combined to make a, something that works. Yeah, it's tricky. Lots of testing. But if I set the glue strength back to 0.6, well, let's set it to 0.1, you'll see when he hits it, it's going to break straight away because it's sort of very low glue strength. Doink. There you go. So go back here. Constrain. Let's put it back to 0.65. It's a nice number. Just going to scroll through these for you. You can take a look. These are scale dependent, so whatever scene scale you're using, you'll need to make sure that you adjust basically. I don't have any fields, dynamic fields affecting this, so it's quite light. All I've got is the nucleus gravity set to 9.8, and that's really about it. Everything else is I've adjusted through the actual end cloth itself, not using any additional fields. Okay, a couple of things that help me to get a good simulation is stretch resistance, compression resistance. These can be set quite high. Don't be afraid to set them high if you need to. Deform resistance is a good one as well to test, because if you're finding that your mesh is exploding, I'll just show you. Well, okay, it's not exploding here. But if you find that your mesh is exploding, having a deform resistance might help to hold the mesh together, hold the shape of the mesh, or shape of the vines in this case. Make sure when you create before you run your simulation, you set the initial state as well. Otherwise, you might find some weird things going on at the start. So let's move down. Damp, important. Stretch damp, also important. These also help you stop the mesh from exploding. Drag is also important. Drag, damp, and stretch damp. So if you're finding your mesh is exploding, try tweaking these. I don't use any force fields. Okay, and another one, another important setting you want to check: the max iterations, self-collide iterations, and collide last threshold. If you're finding your mesh is exploding, generally it means that your simulation rate is too low, so you need to up it. So find that increasing this one and this one will generally help. And also in your main nucleus. Okay, this is an important one here. If your simulation is looking crap, increasing the sub steps is gonna help a lot. I think by default, I think maybe 6. So let's set it to 6 and watch the mesh blow up. Yeah, there you go. See, not pretty. If I set this to set the nucleus to substeps 1, very low. Yeah, that does not work at all. So tip of the day: set your nucleus substeps in the solver attributes to, at least 10. But for your final, I put up to 20 or 40, depending on the resolution of your mesh here. But I found 20 was a good one. Keeps things nice and stable. Yes, very nice. Let's go back to nucleus. So max collision iterations, you want to up that as well. I've used 10. And don't worry about this. Also, yeah, check your time attributes, your start frame. If you're finding that your simulation isn't starting at the same time your playback range is starting, that's probably because you need to set your start frame to the start of your playback range. If you don't, you're going to have lots of problems. That's about it for the nucleus and end cloth. So let's move on to part 3, reparenting the particles, instancing the particles onto the vines. Just before I leave you, just a note for the final. If you remember, I had quite a few vines going. So I didn't actually simulate them all at the same time. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different vines. What I simply did was set up one single vine that I liked. In this case, exactly in this case, and then I just created a very simple geometry cache. Geometry cache, create new cache for each version basically. So let's say this is version 1, I'll cache it out, and then cache it out using geometry cache, not encloth cache, and then I'll move it somewhere else, maybe somewhere here, and then run the cache and cache these out as separate caches, different caches, of course, different names. So rather than having a whole bunch of these simulating exactly the same time, which is going to kill your system, I only used one instance and basically just duplicated them using different geometry caches, and it works really well. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll set everything up, group these in a group, run the simulation, create geometry cache, and duplicate the geometry itself, so we get the position of the geometry, and then just you can either export this as a separate scene or just hide it, and in the final all we do is import each geometry cache back onto different groups of the geometry. Complicated to explain, but yeah, it saves a lot of time. Okay, moving on to part 3. Thank you.